So I have this copy of Moral Principles in Education. It's one I haven't read more. I have one that's really, really marked up. Actually, different colors of pencil and pen, implying I've read more than once. This one, it looks like I've only read once and highlighted some. Might have read this one first, though. I think I got the white one when I took educational philosophy class with Madhu Prakash. So, 1909, John Dewey. So, what is education? I'm going to mark it up now, right? Introduction: Education as a public business. It is one of the complaints of the schoolmaster that the public does not defer to his professional opinion as completely as it does to that of practitioners of other professions. It's a question of power, right? Deferring. So the professional wants people to defer to them. They are the professional, right? The doctor wants you to defer to their wisdom. The lawyer wants you to defer to theirs. The salesman wants you to defer to them. And a schoolmaster wants you to defer to them. At first sight, it might seem as though this indicated a defect in the public or in the profession. And yet, a wider view of the situation would suggest that such a conclusion is not a necessary one. The relations of education to the public are different from those of any other professional work. Education is the public business with us, in a sense that the protection and restoration of personal health or legal rights are not. To an extent characteristic of no other institution save that of the state itself, the school has power to modify the social order. There we go. Dewey doesn't wait to get into it, right? 1909. This is early Dewey, too. Not early as in he's too young to really have a full theory done. He was writing back in the 1870s, I think. And he starts writing extensively about education a good decade before this, if I remember right. He has one that's like 1899, and I read that with a group of doctoral students at Eastman Conservatory of Music one year, and critiqued it for its racism, right? Progressives, right? The idea that the progressive man is also the progressive races, from lesser races to finally being white. I think Catholics fall just below white in that order. 1899 progressive John Dewey theory, right? Not sure. So, but the power to modify the social order. So this is something that conservatives like Mortimer Adler don't like about Dewey, is his use of power. But it's something that progressives that love Dewey love about Dewey, his use of power. Is putting it right up front. This is about power. Okay, continue. And under our political system, it is the right of each individual to have a voice in the making of social policies, as indeed he has a vote in the determination of the political affairs. So here we go. Individual vote. Everybody knows Dewey. It's about democratic education. Now, this isn't his democracy in education, which comes later, right? But those ideas are already here, right? It's already democratic. So just like there's a vote, each individual has some voice in making the social policies of the school. If this be true, education is primarily a public business, and only secondarily a specialized vocation. Now here's where conservatives are mistaken about Dewey's writing, at least early on. It's public business, only secondarily vocational. A lot of them throw them into Votech education, things like that, those movements. I think they're mistaken. I think they're mistaken at least from the context of 1909 Dewey. Continuing on. The layman, then, will always have his right to some utterance on the operation of public schools. So it's a right for the public, for the voter. Now, this is also where I think progressive Deweyans today are in error, because he starts right out, right, that it's beyond the school walls, right? But Deweyans today, they do their democracy in the classroom. They avoid grandmas like the plague. They don't want grandmas in there saying what words the students should be using in their hip-hop compositions. Okay. So, up to the next page. Education is expert service. Oh, by the way, I think Dewey as a philosopher, right, is really good. Even if I don't still come to the same conclusions as he did, I certainly did at one point consider myself full-on a Deweyan democratic educator. And I think it's still so important. It's such a big chunk of what I do, but it's not the entirety of what I do. There are other things, humanities education in a traditional sense, that I think are in Dewey still, but I think I would change the emphasis. And I'd also expand the school beyond the school walls, which I think is in Dewey too, because Dewey wrote pretty extensively against progressive educators who did not expand their work beyond the school walls. So he's not straight up progressive education. He's arguing something different. And philosophers have complex ways of talking, right? I do myself, and so I'm very misunderstood sometimes when I want to push against something, when I'm trying to find maybe a middle way sometimes, or a third way. You know, like think about like the aspect of politics, right? It's really hard to say I'm a Democrat or a Republican. I've voted Democrat and been a Democrat since I was 18, right? I haven't only voted for Democrats, though. Partially because I have this sense of localism. I'm a left localist. That puts me in line with Russell Kirk, right? Who is the granddaddy of American intellectual conservatism, right? Before it became a globalist neoliberal venture, when it still argued for the conservation of the planet and skepticism towards capitalists. These things are in Russell Kirk that are at the heart of conservatism, but not what's generally called conservative today. Now, of course, the MAGA movement today isn't conservative. It doesn't claim to be. It's very liberatory, right-wing liberatory in some way. Big business. But there are aspects of that are true as well, just as there are aspects of the Democratic Party with its call for ever bigger bureaucracies. Right? Especially if you're facing giant businesses, you need giant bureaucracies. Of course, I'd rather see that third way, where we have small local businesses, split all the big businesses into 1,000 small ones, have more owners, more people owning actual property. And then you don't need so big of a government because you don't have to go up against billionaires. Okay, continuing. Education is expert service. I have said some utterance, but not all, for school mastering as its own special mysteries, its own knowledge and skill to which the untrained layman cannot penetrate. I use the word occult knowledge because I kind of make fun of this stuff too, right? We use this term to make our scholarship and education occult. I don't. Well, I do sometimes. I have to, right? I'm forced to, but I'd rather use a much more common word, something people can just pick up and listen to and read and understand about my philosophy. We are just beginning to recognize that the school and the government have a common problem in this respect. Education and politics are two functions fundamentally controlled by public opinion. Yet, the conspicuous lack of efficiency and economy in the school and in the state has quickened our recognition of a larger need for public service, for expert service, but just where shall public opinion justly express itself? What shall probably be left to the expert judgment? Okay, I think we've seen far too much efficiency in recent years. The whole testing system, rubrics were invented like in the 1990s, and they dominate education now. Lesson planning, all these things limit the possibilities for education to be surprising, to form individuals with surprising knowledges. Testing, narrowing complex human questions about living and dying to A, B, C, D, filling out bubble sheets for the government for hours on end. These things, efficiency and economy, are terrible for school, rightly justified and condemned as terrible. The relation of expert opinion and public opinion. Insofar as broad policies and ultimate ends, so we're looking at ends now, right? Teleology. Let me write that word here. Teleology. Insofar as broad policies and ultimate ends affecting the welfare of all are to be determined, the public may well claim its right to settle issues by the vote or the voice of the majorities, but the selection and prosecution of the detailed ways and means by which the public will is to be executed efficiently must remain largely a matter of specialized and expert service. To the superior knowledge and technique required here, the public may well defer. We've seen lots of specialization over the last 115 years too, right? 116 years since this book was written. Continuing on. In the conduct of the schools, it is well for the citizens to determine the ends proper to them, and it is their privilege to judge of the efficacy of the results. So the public, the citizens, should identify the school's ends. What kind of person do we make? Do we need character education, right? Do we need job training? Those ends, the public should be judging. And judging efficacy of the results. Are we really producing the citizens we want? Or are we producing a bunch of criminals and people that are stuck in their screen time, screen addicted, right? We can judge that. We need to, as a public. Continuing on. Upon questions that concern all of the manifold details by which the children are to be converted into desirable types of men and women, the expert schoolmaster should be authoritative. Okay, so if the public is deciding the ends and the judging the results, the schoolmaster is in charge of the details. What methods ought to be used. The expert schoolmaster should be authoritative, at least to a degree commensurate with the superior knowledge of this very complex problem. The administration of schools, the making of the course of study, the selection of texts, the prescription of methods of teaching, these are matters with which the people or the representative upon boards of education cannot deal save with danger of becoming mere meddlers. Okay, so I don't know that I agree entirely with this. So are we really, is the public really meddling in education if they believe that education should include the study of Shakespeare, right? That they want their kids to come out of the school system having read some Shakespeare and at least knowing it, right? Maybe the community could decide that. Now that's a course of study. Selection of texts, maybe that could be left to the experts, but then again, I don't know. We're taking a lot of power away from the people, right? And calling it democratic. If people can't at least look at the texts, right? And put some of their community's values into them. The prescription of methods of teaching, well, yeah, maybe that, right? Because teachers shouldn't be really dominated in their method by either the schoolmaster or the public, right? They should be judged on the results. Okay, but meddlers. I don't know if that's meddling, though. I would have more democracy and not less. The discussion of moral education and illustration of mistaken views of laymen. Nowhere is the validity of this distinction between education as a public business and education as expert professional service brought out more clearly than in an analysis of public discussion of the moral work of the school. Okay, so that's what this book is going to be about, right? The moral work of the school. How frequently of late have those unacquainted with the special nature of the school proclaimed the moral ends of education, and at the same time demanded their direct ethical instruction as a particular method by which they were to be realized. Okay. Particular ethical instruction, so maybe Bible study or study of, I don't know, Aristotle's ethics, right? Maybe people are interfering too much for Dewey in those things. But what if they're important for the community? Do we really deserve a public school that's supposed to serve the public that doesn't line up with what the community wants their adults to understand? You don't really have much of a choice if you're poor to decide to take your kid out and send them to a expensive religious school or private school. Or classical academy, right? This too, in spite of the fact that those who know best the powers and limitations of instruction as the instrument have repeatedly pointed out the futility of assuming that knowledge is right constitutes a guarantee of right doing. How common, well, that's a truth, right? Knowledge of right is not the same as right doing. Some people know what's right and don't do what's right. I think that's just like basic knowledge, right? Continuing on. How common it is for those who assert that education is for social efficacy to assume that the school should return to the barren discipline of the traditional formal subjects, reading, writing, and the rest. Reading, writing, and the rest. Barren subjects. I think that's all we do now, right? So Dewey did not win. He doesn't seem to want to be doing reading and writing. He wants those things to happen inside other subjects. This too, regardless of the fact that it has taken a century of educational evolution to make the course of study varied and rich enough to call for those impulse and activities of social life which need the training of a child. Okay, so not Common Core. I don't know, not No Child Left Behind. Not the education we have, right? Because we want varied subjects, which inspire the social life of the child. And how many who speak glowingly of the large services of the public schools to a democracy of free and self-reliant men. Self-reliance. That points us to Emerson, right? If you've read Emerson, you can connect all your knowledge of that to this now, because Dewey's explicitly making the connection. Free and self-reliant men affect a cynical and even vehement opposition to the self-government of schools. These would not have the children learn to govern themselves or one another, but would have the masters rule them. Ignoring the fact that this common practice in childhood may be a foundation for this evil condition in adult society where the citizens are arbitrarily ruled by political bosses. He would definitely see Trump as a political boss today. All right, he was definitely on the left politically. So the children learning to govern themselves. This is obviously becomes a central part for Deweyan educational theory. Not much more. I know this one's kind of long, but we might as well get through the whole introduction. One need not cite further cases of the incompetence of the lay public to deal with technical questions of school methods. Instances are plentiful to show that well-meaning people, competent enough to judge of the aims and results of schoolwork, make a mistake in insisting upon the prerogative of directing the technical aspects of education with a dogmatism that would not characterize their statements regarding any other special field of knowledge or action. I think he made that argument pretty strong. That's just bringing it back together, right? That the public is not smart enough to judge the technical aspects of education, but should only look at the aims and results. Last section, a fundamental understanding of moral principles in education. Nothing can be more useful than for the public and the teaching profession to understand their respective functions. The teacher needs to understand public opinion and the social order, as much as the public needs to comprehend the nature of expert educational service. So now we've moved from the schoolmaster to the teacher and the public. And I would have asked him to clarify, is a teacher deciding method, subjects, course of study, texts, in this case, or is the schoolmaster, the principal, we'd call him today. It will take time to draw the boundary lines that will be conducive to respect, restraint, and efficiency in those concerned, but a beginning can be made upon fundamental matters, and nothing so touches the foundation of our educational thought as a discussion of the moral principles in education. It is our pleasure to present a treatment of them by a thinker whose vital influence upon the reform of school methods is greater than that of any of his contemporaries. In this discussion of the social and psychological factors in moral education, there is much that will suggest that social opinion should determine, and much that will indicate what must be left to the trained and the school official. Okay, so that last part is written as if it's written by somebody else, but there is no note that it is written by anybody else, and I think I've just skipped over that, right? It is our pleasure to present a treatment to them by a thinker whose vital influence. So referring to himself as a thinker whose vital influence upon the reform of school methods is greater, right? That's a weird way to talk to yourself. But there is no name here, right? So it's not somebody else, though obviously a Deweyan person who wrote it. There's no introduction by blah, blah, blah. It's actually a very short book in general. But we're going to continue with the moral purpose of the school next time. Have a blessed day.